Welcome to the Midlife Pilot Podcast. We are glad you're with us. What is it like to become a pilot in your 40s and 50s? The challenges are unique for those of us in midlife, but so are the rewards. Hosts Ben, Brian, and Ted talk learning to fly, growing as pilots, and the joy of flying to destinations. The purpose of the podcast is not to teach, but to share knowledge and experiences of being a midlife pilot. Join the Midlife Pilot community and listen in every week. We are not CFIs or particularly intelligent, so if you want to learn how to fly, talk to anyone else other than the hosts of a podcast. Even this intro was too challenging for us, and we used a robot to do it. Okay, checklists are complete. Let's get the show started.
Hello, and welcome to the Midlife Pilot Podcast, where we share the experiences and challenges of flying in midlife. Whether you're a seasoned pilot, training for a rating, or just thinking about getting started in aviation, we like to think of the podcast as your aviation companion and your weekly dose of aviation inspiration. My name is Ben. I am a IFR-rated pilot with a commercial certificate. I'm based in the metro Atlanta area, flying a Cessna 182, I like to call the Beast. Joining me tonight, as always, and forever, first we'll go with my friend in Nashville, Tennessee, home of the Bachelorette Super Charlie. He flies a Cherokee 180 named Lucy, and we like to call him Brian. Hello, sir.
You'd like to call me a lot of things. How's it going, everybody? Super excited about tonight. We've got our friend Nathan Ballard here, and I'm super excited about. I have 1,000 questions for you, Nate. So I'm excited to get this thing going.
Put your helmet on, Nate, and buckle the chin strap. It's about to get real.
All right, let's go.
Joining us from the West Coast, our favorite sport pilot extraordinaire as a host on a podcast. His name is Ted. He flies a flight design CTLS we like to call the Egg. Hello, Ted.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm real good.
I'm permanently cold, but doing well.
It was 15 degrees here in Atlanta, so... And with a puppy in the house, we're spending a lot more time outside than we'd like to be. I can assure you of that.
Speaking of Atlanta, who do we have as a guest here?
Tonight, joining us from the metro Atlanta area, he is a CFI extraordinaire. He's got an amazing YouTube channel. His name is Nathan Ballard, and he was my CFI for my commercial. And probably, I'm just going to go on record. He's probably one of my favorite CFIs out there. There, I said it. Welcome, Nate.
I appreciate it. I forgot that this was a pilot podcast. I thought this was the Eddie Vedder, Pearl Jam, Seattle 90s flannel podcast. But we can talk pilot stuff too.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, if we want to switch over to grunge, that's pretty much what I listen to. So I'm down with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, it's funny that this guy from Portland is the one with no flannel. How is
I know. It's just amazing. You didn't quite get the intro of Nathan right, because if I do it by how you introduce yourself, Ben, it is a master CFII with an ATP rating who flies a fill in the blank. So yeah.
You know, it's just a lot of words for me to come up with. It's too complex for this simple redneck. So I apologize for missing all that, and I appreciate you calling it out, Ted.
Yeah.
And Diners Club member.
So tonight we have Nathan on. If you haven't seen his most recent video, he just posted, and I watched it actually for the second time today. Learning from the military aviation, learning and adopting their safe practices into general aviation. But before we get into that, want to remind everybody we have the Big Texas Send coming up May 2nd through the 4th. Tango 82 is the airport identifier. It is Gillespie County Airport located in Fredericksburg, Texas, kind of in between San Antonio and Austin area. The response has been, well, I'm just going to go ahead and say it. It's been overwhelming. We've gotten 44 people send us RSVPs. It's not too late to do that. You can still do that at our website at midlifepilotpodcast.com. Of those 44 RSVPs, we're counting about 70 people who intend to come. It'll be in about 35 different airplanes. So it's...
that's 4 months out.
That's 4 months out. Yeah. So we're still pulling things together. We'll probably record an episode out there, and we've kind of planned out a few itineraries that people can go on their own. This is nothing structured, super structured, I should say. But it's just we're gonna send it and see what happens.
Yeah. I was just thinking about this. Feasibly, there could be some, because we have people that listen to the podcast that are thinking about starting training. Theoretically, it's entirely possible that somebody could hear this right now, and that was just the tipping point for them. I'm going to this fly-in. What do I have to do to go to this fly-in? Well, I'm going to start my training tomorrow. And they could go through and get their private pilot certificate between now and early May, and then fly themselves out there.
I've got to say, if it's that fresh of a pilot, please only do that if you live in Austin or San Antonio. If you live further than that, commercial is a great option, and there are people you can fly with.
Yeah,
because that low of hours,
you're in the Atlanta area and you're being instructed by Nathan Ballard, then you'd be totally set to fly there on your own. It will be no problem to be a walk in the park for you.
Or if you fly a Cirrus, because then we'll make way for you. It's fine.
That's
right. But yeah, so I'm super excited about it. We are definitely doing a live show at this event. Now, the details of that are being determined. We are not the only big show in town at the Fredericksburg or at the Gillespie Airport. So it's going to be interesting. We might just be doing it. It might look more like a rally. We might have like bullhorns or something. But no, I think we're going to find a space here. But we will definitely do something. We will do a live show, and then that'll be good because we can right all of the wrongs that we have here tonight with Nate, and kind of turn this whole thing back around. So, yeah. Do you want me to go ahead and do the housekeeping real quick?
That would be wonderful.
All right, I'll just knock that out. So, housekeeping. We are grateful for you guys making this the best pilot community that we know of, a positive space where we share everything from training experiences, share personal minimums, tackle ownership challenges, review flight plans, listen to whatever Nate says, and best of all, make new aviation friends. You can connect with us, join our Patreon community from $1 a month or do a one-time annual Patreon, or you can even do PayPal drops via our website. 25 cents per episode is the minimum spend, which I think, it actually helps. So if you can do it, that'd be great. You can access exclusive content, including we actually have a new check. We do a lot of check ride debriefs and record them and put them in our Patreon content. We have a fresh one from one Lord Alpha Juliet commercial check ride debrief. Really awesome. We also do killing zone conversations and more. And you could access to our Discord. 10% supports Freedom Aviation Network's anti-human trafficking efforts. Watch us live on YouTube Mondays, 8 p.m. Eastern. Share your stories. And you can send anything you want to midlifepilotpodcast@gmail.com. When I say anything, use that with a grain of salt. We read every message, and you might even hear it on the show. So for everything Midlife Pilot Podcast, community feedback, merch, dad hats, big text to send, t-shirts, and more, visit midlifepilotpodcast.com.
Yeah, fantastic. In the Patreon crowd, we have one new supporter this week. At the Landomatic level, we have Tony H. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Tony.
And kind of looking at what happened in the community this week, it's obviously winter, so there was a lot of talk about cold weather flying and kind of operations and everything else. And there are also the winter topics that happen in aviation, which is high wing versus low wing, and about systems and automation, like signs that we're flying less and we've got time to chat. Congrats to Mountain Rat Matt on their first solo, which is fantastic.
Yes.
And Dennis had his first solo cross country as well. So congrats.
That is amazing.
I want to ask Nate real quick.
Yeah.
In your mind, what is, as a CFI, what makes you smile wider? A first cross-country solo successfully done or first solo?
Absolutely the first solo.
Okay.
Hopping out of that plane after you've shut down the engine, like some people don't do. Definitely shut down the engine. It's nerve-wracking, as you can imagine, but you just know what's happening in that airplane at that moment, and it's you know how happy they are and what a life-changing experience that is. So far and away, first solo.
What makes you the most nervous?
Probably the first solo too. Yeah. You just like, does this person have it? I mean, and they always do, but just, the airplane's going to feel different. Their motions are going to be different. Are they going to, follow through what they've been learning and learned in practice? And it always works out.
Awesome. Tonight, we're going to be talking about Nate's experience in spending some time with the Air Force in their training program and how it relates to the general aviation. But before we get into that, I wanted to check in with everybody, Nate included, about any recent flying that they've been doing or what they've been up to. Brian, you want to start us off? Anything fun lately?
Well, no, I haven't flown this week. It's been miserably Arctic. But one of the things that I think is interesting is we all in some way have downtime, or you're grounded for some reason or another, for weather or for maybe your sickness or just family matters or various things going on. And I've been writing some things around that notion for a thing I'm making about that. But I try to make the most of the time, it's not always about studying, or I think there's a culture of constant forward movement, and I think that's great. But I think that sometimes with aviation, and you see examples of this in nature and all through everything, but sometimes you just gotta just calm down for a minute and just let it breathe and let it simmer and let it sit and let your brain codify and draw root systems together and things like that. So that is what I've said to make myself feel better about the sadness of not flying.
I did get to go up, and Ted, I know you did as well today, but mine was actually a mission-driven purpose. I went up on Friday. I hope everybody's sitting down, but we're actually in talks to upgrade, take the beast from 19th century technology or 20th century technology to 21st century technology. It'll be a phased approach, but we're starting to get estimates to have a few upgrades done to the panel. So I'm excited about it. My bank is maybe not as excited as I am, but so I flew over to Winder, Georgia, and met with some folks over there and came back home, and it was a pretty fun flight. When you're crossing over the north side of Atlanta, as Nathan knows, being located in that area, I always get flight following, even if it's a 7-minute flight, because they're launching them out of Peachtree to Cab and also Lawrenceville, and you're kind of flying right in between them. And so you're dodging missiles all over the place, and it's great to have that person looking over you. And that's going to segue into probably some of the stuff we talk about tonight. But what about you, Ted? You did some flying today, didn't you?
I did. I flew about 9 hours between Saturday and today, Monday. 7 of that was Saturday, which is good because I had about 6 weeks of almost no flying. I had a great time on Saturday. Everything was minus 2,000 density altitude. Never saw above freezing until I came back and landed. It landed at 9 new airports. It was a busy day.
Wow.
And then I just went and did a little short flight today, and 2-hour flight today, and saw a couple new airports, which is really fun. So yeah, landed on a really narrow one with snow, and also landed on a Chris C size airport. It's a runway. It's a 200 plus by 13,000. So that's some of the biggest that I've been on. And I should have landed sideways on it, I know. But yeah, it's nice to get back out in the egg and do a little bit of flying. So yeah.
Nice. How about you, Mr. Ballard? Any flying as of commercially, non-commercially, behind the yoke?
Well, just some demo. I did 2 CFI spin endorsement flights. And that's always, sometimes, that meme on the internet where there's the guy in the roller coaster and he's like going up and down and he's just staring like nothing's phasing him,
Yeah.
Spin training is not like that. Like I'm like, okay, well, what's about to happen? No. I mean, I've done dozens of these things and it's just such a different feeling for the person. You kind of never know what you're going to get. So I had a couple of those just in the past week and a half that are.
And what were you doing those in?
172. Yep. So
nice.
Ben, you're up next.
I know. Let's talk tailwheel and then we'll talk CFI stuff. So, Ted, you said we do have some feedback that we got in since last episode.
Yeah, we've got a couple things for Brian to read here, 1 or 2. It's up to him to read just some things.
Well,
that we'd saw.
It's really, I mean, it's really from the Discord ultimately, but in the conversation about first solo and first cross country, Mike Alpha Golf, our good friend, he said, I remember after my first solo, after my first cross country, the odd feeling of taxiing back to the flight school and the airport didn't even notice I had just completed this totally death-defying, amazing feat of incredibleness. I don't know what I was expecting, a ticker tape parade, a laser show from the tower, but it was also totally comforting that I was, quote unquote, just another pilot making another landing. Like I joined the club, and it really is. It is such a there's the level of imposter syndrome that you have.
Oh yeah.
At that stage is so great. I still have it, but it's much less. But then it just feels, I don't know. Have you ever had like VIP to a concert or something, or I don't know, you got hooked up with some front row seats to something and you kind of have this moment of like, how did I get here? Like, how am I backstage with Eddie Van Halen or something? Like, I'm not really, I don't belong here. It feels a little bit like that. Like I'm here, you got to own the space that you're in, but also I'm kind of a visitor. So that's fantastic. Super exciting.
That is awesome. It was for me, I think of it in terms like when I went to college, I spent 4 years in school, actually 4.5 to be exact. And you walk across that stage, but you spent so much time there. It's like, of course this is happening and whatever. You spend that 4, 6, 9 months or a year, however long it takes. It's a more compressed period of time. And when you're done with it, you're like, I don't know, it just feels more monumental, if that makes any sense, because it's and maybe it's because we're older. I don't know. But yeah, I see what you're saying.
It kind of makes you also question FAA requirements.
With the 3 of us, at least.
It's like, that's it? Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
They're letting me fly? All right. Somebody's got low standards. Yeah.
So, there's a lot to get into with you, Nate, but I just want to go ahead and turn the corner right now. I don't want to waste any more time, but I want to ask you, in the same way that we're talking about the student pilot experience and the low hour pilot experience and the imposter syndrome and the how did I get here? Am I supposed to be here? Am I allowed to be here? I have a feeling that your experience in recent aviation exploits in the military, you might have felt that way a lot.
That's probably the best segue ever, because and before I get into the full story, there was a moment when I was in the equipment fitting area and my helmet was hanging on a little hanger, and it said, there's a label on it, said VIP. I'm like, this is so wrong. You guys don't know who I am. Like, that was the biggest. I mean, there's all of these fighter pilots around me. I'm like, please, let's get rid of that sign, please. Yeah, it was. And just to start out, to clarify, like, I was not in the military. I have huge respect for anybody that has served or is serving. And I'm a civilian general aviation pilot. And my whole thought process behind this project, I guess if I'll call it that, was to find out what are the best aviators do that we might not know about, because we haven't had that training, because we don't live it every day, and because it's not our profession. Like, we're midlife IT people and, bankers and whatnot. We're not professional fighter pilots. So that was my approach going into this. Like, what can we learn from the best in the world that do this stuff?
Let me just jump in real quick and say, I think you're selling yourself a little short, because I think if I were to do the same program, my helmet would say scrub. So, but continue on. I just, I'm sure that they've done their research and they did their background checks. They knew they had in their presence. So, but tell us a little bit more. Give us an overview. I also want to encourage, again, the people to go to your YouTube channel and remind me exactly how it's named.
Safer Flying. With
Safer
Nathan
Flying is his YouTube channel. We'll have it linked in the show notes. And for everybody out there in the audio land and our live audience, Nathan took a trip out to Texas to do what he just said. See what we can learn in general aviation from our military compatriots and the folks that are doing that. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Nathan, and tell us what your experience was like, and we'll just kind of pepper you with questions. Brian, do you have anything else to set the stage with?
I just want to. Everything starts with an idea,
right?
So I'm interested also just from take us all the way through, man. Like the genesis of all of this, I think is fascinating.
I have these ideas at the top of my head, and I'll put them on a sticky note and on a wall. And I'm like, I want to do this. And I had this one. I was like, what do the pros do? And how can I really find out what it is they do? So that was it was just always there. And I finally asked the question. I asked a couple of branches of our military, and they were all amazing. And then the Air Force said, they vetted me and went through. I had to do a lot of paperwork, and they said, "All right, come on." So what ended up happening was I got on an airplane and went out to Wichita Falls, Texas, went to Sheppard Air Force Base, and got to spend 2 full days, basically all access. I mean, me and my phone and some cameras to ask questions, observe everything, be guided around, and see the inside of how does this stuff work. And every time I'd ask a question like, "Hey, can I show this?" They're like, "Please show it. Like, it's going to make the airspace that we fly in safer for us and for you. We want to share this stuff." So that was kind of like how it started, and to get me out to Texas. And what happened from there, I wasn't sure how it was going to go, but I was immediately thrown into egress training and equipment fitting and medical exams. I was like, okay, this stuff is getting real. This is not just like a press visit. I mean, I guess it was, but it was. They said this. You're not going to go around. We're not going to just go burn up 4,000 pounds of gas to let you take a look. Like, we're going to integrate you in a real training mission that we're going to do in our T-38 Talons. I'm like, okay, I hope I don't pass out.
Hey, real quick. So before you move on, tell us about the egress training and the medical. I'm really fascinated. Your video is, I know you're going to do more videos in this kind of series. I have so many questions. In this part in the video, you just showed a couple things and you had to move on to the next thing and the next thing. I was like, whoa. I have questions. So given that you had a helmet that said VIP as opposed to VEP, a very expendable person, they allowed you to be trained in the egress as to just saying, well, yeah, I guess we didn't cover that, buddy. So see you later. So walk us through the egress training and the medical aspect of it to whatever extent is reasonable.
Yeah. I mean, the egress training was, they're putting me, just a civilian guy in the back of this very expensive, fast airplane. And if something goes wrong, things are going to happen in a hurry. And there's a lot of liability around that. I mean, I had to sign a bunch of stuff, but what happens in the event of an emergency? What are we going to do? How are we going to get out? What are the different ways that we might get out? And there's different settings on the ejection seats and taking care of when the pins are inserted and removed to make your seat hot. And then if we do end up punching out, how do you fall? We had to go out to this platform and jump off and land different ways and did a simulation of our parachutes all twisted up. Now, what are you going to do? That kind of thing. So,
like line twists and bag locks and all that kind of stuff. Did you do a cannonball?
I don't know what that is, other than jumping in a pool.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
So you're basically airborne qualified if you went into the Army right now, is what you're saying.
Yeah, they totally would let me take one of their jets out. They should, yes.
Well, I meant the Army, sounds like very similar training that they do when you go into airborne school. So, yeah. Right.
But so that part was very real. I mean, it's a good question. And it definitely opened my eyes if they weren't open enough. And then the medical part was... It was pretty cursory. I mean, they're, checking vitals and all that stuff. But the discussion around, hey, this is what's going to happen when you're pulling nearly 6 Gs out there. And that part really kind of, not freaked me out. That's not the right word. But that was like, okay, they're not going to take it easy. Like, and the person I was with, Switch Helton, Zachary Switch Helton, who basically was my awesome tour guide the whole time. He's the chief of safety there. He said, look, if you don't feel good, if something doesn't work, if you're passed out, we're going to keep flying because this is, unless it's a serious situation. I mean, this is our real training mission. And this is, we got student pilots out there and instructors. This isn't playtime. So that really made it real. Just that discussion around the medical part of the G's that you're going to pull and the things that you might experience when you're out there flying.
Yeah. And did you grade out at one point? Do you remember?
I did, yes.
Okay. Yeah.
And just, at a high level, and I've got a couple more videos in this series coming at a high level. Basically, we went out north of Sheppard Air Force Base through a MOA to some restricted airspace. And if you think about laps in the traffic pattern, that's basically what we did. But instead of doing landings, they were simulated bombing runs. Yeah. And we started at 3,500 feet and went all the way up and did runs at 10,000 feet. And the speeds vary between 330 up to, I think, 375 knots. And you basically dive in at the ground and then you drop your bomb and pull. And that's when the G's were, I don't know how to describe it other than it is legit. And I was like, gosh, am I gonna be able to handle this? And at one point I did gray out. Like it was crazy. The color just was like, it was gone. So,
and he sounded like he was in the office, just doing a bombing run. Here we go. Well, time to descend for this one. And okay, well, that one was this far off from the target. No big deal. It was so casual. And the other time I really noticed how casual that was is taking off. He's super, super low key on the takeoff. He's like, well, afterburners are engaged. It's just this this is normal.
These people are professionals. Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you, Ted. It's just like, they're professionals. That was kind of what I was going to get there. What are you guys doing that we can learn from? And, and you'll see in that first video if you watch it. And I do want to put a quick plug in, kind of. Please. I want people to really see this, not because I want views or likes or subscriptions, but because the tremendous time and effort that the people in the Air Force put into this. I want to make sure that they see that this is a good return on their time and investment, that this is not just a one-off guy like going to get in the back of an airplane, but that the message that we're hopefully getting out to the general aviation public is going to be well received. So if you're listening to this and you get a chance to watch it or even comment on that video, like how much you appreciate the Air Force and military, I think that'd be awesome.
More importantly, share it with friends. I've sent it out to a couple of my friends. Tell us a little bit about, so you were coming back from those bombing runs. Y'all had interesting occurrence. It almost like it was scripted for the purpose of you going out there, which I know that it wasn't. But can you describe what happened?
Yeah, it was crazy because we had done our, Major Helt and I done like our sit down brief. We'll talk about briefings at some point, but he said, hey, we sometimes deal with this, that there's VFR targets flying right through our MOA. I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm sure, that happens a lot or whatnot. I did not expect it to happen on that flight back. And if to set the stage after doing those over a dozen bombing runs, I'm sitting in the back not doing anything. I'm exhausted, right? And so now we have four airplanes. They are flying in tight formation. 2 of those pilots with instructors are student pilots. So they're getting their butt kicked out there. And there's a VFR traffic that just plows right through the middle of the MOA, right in the path of that flight of 4 T-38s, flying at, over 300 knots. And ATC is like, all right, we got a guy, and that was the real lesson there, that in seeing it in person, the Air Force and military, and anytime we talk about flight following, like, it's not really for you, right? It is for you, but it's for everybody else.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're going to go right through an active military airspace, talk to somebody. And it's not like they don't necessarily want you to change what you're doing. They just want to be able to tell you, hey, there's some fast movers coming your way.
Now, these military jets, can't they see the planes on their radar?
That's such a good question, Ted, because when I started this series, I wrote down a series of questions, and that was one of them. Like, well, of course, military has advanced avionics in all their airplanes or helicopters. And the answer to that, that plane was built in the 1960s. And while the flight decks are certainly updated, they don't have onboard traffic radar. They use the same technology that we use. And if you look in the video, we've got an ADS-B puck in there that is connected to an iPad mini that I'm looking at in the back. And so there's no traffic alerts going off. So if you're, for us midlifers, if we're going out for a nice flight, and just like Ben was saying, and, his short flight over to Winder, talk to somebody.
So
it really can make a difference.
2 quick questions. One, am I going to be reimbursed for flying a 172 right through that MOA as you were filming? And 2, when the flow of this flight of 4 is disrupted by a target that is not talking to anybody, what is the sort of materially what gets disrupted? Like, what actually is the impact to the flight of 4 for being the quote unquote rando flying through the MOA that was actually me?
Well, first of all, I sent you that $20, Brian. Hopefully you got that already. So, but and we talked about it after, Major Helton and I, he said, if we had been in a worse fuel situation or we could not deconflict from that traffic, then they're obviously going to have to change their profile. Right. And they burned 4,000 pounds of fuel. And in the longer videos that you'll see, you'll hear people reporting different stages and levels of their fuel. Right. And they're right there at, hey, I got to get back fuel. That thing is burning so much gas so fast. It's crazy. So, had they not been able to deconflict, they would have, had to do something different. We were already close to base, but, why do that to the military aircraft that are out there that are, training to be our fighter pilots, right? Just get flight following, right?
Yeah. Ted needs a little further explanation on burning 4,000 pounds of fuel, because that probably takes about a year and a half to do that. So
seriously,
I don't think the concept of somebody burning it within 10, 20 minutes doesn't ring well with him. But.
Let's hit a couple of comments. Peter T, our friend, asked us. He said he can't find the video, and it's going to be in the show notes. But if you're listening, it's Nathan's channel is Nathan Ballard Safer Flying. The video is titled "What Happens When a Small Plane Flies Through Military Airspace." The previous title I liked better, which was "How You Can Fly like a NATO Fighter Pilot," which I thought was great.
Maybe I'll change it back. I went back and forth on those, Ted.
I figured
they're both good. I wish I could title a bunch of different ways.
Yeah, and
Wendell Geek had one as well that I wanted to make sure we hit. He said, "Are the military aircraft in contact with ATC when the MOA is active?"
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's something, just as a 30-second aside here to answer Wendell Geek, is they are usually always flying in an IFR construct, which means they're always going to be, basically IFR. However, going out to the range, there was a time where they said, okay, we're going to the range. We'll see you later, ATC. We'll call you on the way back. I mean, it's all coordinated clearly and very proceduralized. But at that point, they were VFR. But as soon as they got out of those bombing runs, they're talking to ATC again.
Are they on with ATC during the bombing runs?
No.
So what happens if there's VFR traffic during that?
Well, at that point, I mean, that airspace is restricted.
It is restricted, not just a moment. Okay.
If I tried to give Brian another $20 to fly through the restricted airspace, he declined.
Yeah,
So,
but then I saw the byline where it said they can just take you out.
Yeah, you are a target, literally. Yeah.
They're switching to guns.
Yeah, I want to hit Richard K's comment here. He said some of these training events are planned weeks in advance. Turning them off due to a MOA incursion is not wonderful. I thought that was a good way to put it. I'm going out because it's a nice Saturday afternoon. They're going out because this has been planned and briefed.
Well, yeah. So now, Nate, one of the there's a couple of things I saw in this video too. I was like, I got more questions. They happen really fast. There was one still that you had of, it looked like a matrix of emergencies.
Yep.
And it looked really, really interesting. So I want to make sure you have plenty of time to elaborate on without doing spoilers for your video series, right? But spoiler alert, Nate survived, but I really want you to be able to talk ad nauseum, long form here about anything that you can offer us that you learned that we can get reinforced by learning more and watching your video series.
I think one of the things that we talk about on Discord and really in the GA community quite a bit, not even just on Discord, but is, when do I declare, right? When do I say that E word? Should I do it? I've only got an alternator failure. I can probably get back. Like, when do we do it? And I think that the mentality, at least it has been for years, is like, you rub some dirt on it. So what if your alternator failed? Like, just get back, you fly the plane. But the mentality that I observed in the matrix that you're talking about, Brian, is it's basically a playbook, not a checklist, but more of a best practices or go-to guide for, if this happens in the T-38, this is what you do. And almost all of the decision points in that matrix were, if this, then declare, right? It wasn't, if this, maybe talk about it or, like rub some dirt on it. It was declare the emergency, get on the ground, right? And that's for the safety of the pilot. That's for the safety of people on the ground. That's for the safety of other aircraft that they might be flying with. And I think that was one of the big takeaways for me is we in general aviation have been so hesitant to declare emergencies. And we talk about it, Ted, I think you had a good example to talk about maybe on what happens if you don't declare an emergency and it becomes one, right? And the takeaway for me there, for us all to learn from, is if there's any doubt, if there's something in your gut, if something's flashing on in your avionics panel that you just don't know, or it's just not, who cares? Declare it, get on the ground and deal with it that way.
Yeah. I say it so many times. Everybody knows my first rule to myself that I wrote these down during training. Before check ride, these are things I'd written down. Number one was, it's always fuel, right? Everybody knows that one. My number 4, and I'm just writing this how I wrote it as a student. It was, it's okay to declare an emergency. If ATC asks, I probably should. So I was coming back this 7-hour flight on Saturday, and I was on flight following, and I was listening, and it was hard to hear this other pilot, and I was on with center, and they had trouble hearing him too, but they understood. They finally got it. He's having some RPM problems, and I do the math pretty quickly. This is a student from a local 141 school, and he's over the mountains. He's probably 25 miles from the nearest airport, and they tell him to go to one that's even further away than that. He eventually decides to go to the 20-mile away airport. He's got a lot of altitude, which is great. they say, do you want to declare? And he's like, no, I don't. I'll be okay. I believe this is a primary student on their solo cross country. So pretty early. I'm just guessing from what I could hear. They talk to him for a little while and they switch him over to CTAF and say, hey, you didn't declare an emergency, but can you write down this number and give us a call when you get on the ground? We're really concerned. And I don't know if they declare an emergency themselves or they're just paying attention. But because of that, and because of the direction that I was coming in, I was a little low on fuel, but I throttled way back and I orbited in the area for a little while. I asked center if I could go off frequency. And I sat there and I listened to this guy come in from 10 miles out, from 5,000 feet up, as he circled down, descended, and landed. Once he was declared that he was on the runway, then I said, hey, good job. A couple of us are watching for you. And somebody else was on frequency as well, who was obviously in the area paying attention to this guy. And so then I went back to center and I told them that he got on the ground okay. And I don't know if that student realizes a couple of people changed their plans over him and that several people were concerned. You should just declare. In that situation, just declare. You have nothing to lose in that case. And I also knew where he was going. There was going to be no radar and no radio down low for center. So that's part of why I stayed there. But that to me is that example. I've never had that happen where I was listening to that. And so it's just a good reminder to me.
Nathan, I want to ask a question you probably know the answer to, but I hope that you do. What happens after the fact when you declare an emergency and you get it down on the ground? It's my understanding, and I don't know this, we disclaim ourselves all the time. It's basically a phone call with someone at the FSDO. And I mean, I'm trying to help dispel the myth of you're going to be tons and tons of paperwork, blah, blah, blah. And it's always better to declare. The one, and I'll just relay one story. I almost declared, we were coming back from Osh. I lost my alternator, but I was on a 2-mile final. And I mean, I would have been on the ground by the time they got my information. So I didn't really see that I really needed to do it at that point in time. But what happens after you declare and, what do you do?
Yeah, Ben, you described it perfectly. I mean, the technical term I think is it's a nothing burger. Like there's nothing's going to happen. You do a phone call, and maybe not even that. But the only thing that you've done really is, I mean, you have avoided paperwork most likely, but you've teed up an entire team ready to help you. And even if something remotely small happened and you had to get that team, like, who cares if you have to fill out a form? But all the real world stories I've heard has been a big nothing sandwich.
I completely agree. I've talked to several people that have declared, and yeah, it was a 3-minute conversation or 5-minute conversation with somebody on the FSDO by phone. I think you put as much effort into filling out a ASRS report or NASA report than it is after you declare an emergency. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but that's kind of how I felt. And I thought it would be better if people heard that from you instead of from me, because I'm a nothing burger.
Smash burger.
Smash burger.
So my question back to this matrix, I'm very interested in this because I feel like there's got to be, did you see a logical transposition between that decision matrix and maybe something that we're missing in general aviation that we could make, or that could be instructor guided to make, that would lower the threshold for to invite it to make declaring more automatic? And I guess my follow up to that is kind of, did you see things in that matrix that were a surprisingly low threshold of wow? Because we think of military as like, they're going to have to be on fire before they declare an emergency because they're the military. And I would imagine that you saw a lot of things where there were very seemingly smaller issues that they would declare for.
Yeah. in fact, I'll share that. I mean, I got permission to share any information that I had or gathered during that outing, so I'm happy to share that matrix on Discord. But and I don't have it in front of me, but you do. Look at you. So there were things, if I remember, like boost pump failure. I mean, they have redundant boost pumps and all kinds of stuff. Like, if your electric boost pump in your in Lucy died, would you declare an emergency? Well, you have a mechanical, but here they are. Like if something happens, then you're that much, one step closer to being, in a real emergency situation. So I think for us, Brian, the question, like in general aviation, what could we do? We could have something, some of these common things that happen that we all hear and know about that instructors may or maybe not teaching, or that, hey, if your boost pump goes out, go ahead and declare, and maybe that may trigger some to be like, oh, that's just being overly cautious.
Well,
okay.
I mean, a great example is what Ben was just talking about. So forget that you're on 2 mile final, Ben, but say you were flying 30 nautical miles to do some whatever thing, and you are halfway through that trip and you're at 5,500 feet and your voltage is low, and you have an indication that you have an alternator problem. Is that an emergency, Nate?
Well, let me just say to what your point, and then I'll let Nate answer. But
VFR.
I think it's maybe pilot dependent, but for me, I was going to say if that alternator failure, we have a JPI monitor that monitors the ammeter charge, discharge, and all that, and it started flashing. If I saw that 20 miles further north from where we were landing, or 20 miles away from our landing point, I absolutely would have declared an emergency.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to be intelligent pilots, and if Ben's on a 2 mile final, like agreed, like you got the landing's assured, right? You're not gonna. But
by the time I said emergency, we're going to be on the ground. By the time they figured out what we were doing. But go ahead. I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No, I just think one of the takeaways from at least my experience at Sheppard was, if there's any doubt or if there's something that isn't right, why not? Right. And I know, if you're listening to this podcast or you see it later, you might think, well, I know how to fly an airplane, but if we determine you don't have to do paperwork, you get some extra help and attention, why not? Right. So
one other factor that I, on that flight where it was, on final, I was on an IFR plan and we were in the clouds. So we were shooting an approach, and fortunately we had broken out by the time it happened. So even more to the point, that's what absolutely would have made me trigger an emergency, declare an emergency, is because if I'm in the clouds and I'm starting to lose power, I think that elevates enough to, and again, I know there's going to be some people out there that probably disagree with that, but I would have needed extra help.
And maybe we change, just here tonight, we changed the wording of it from I am declaring an emergency to being I declare I need some attention, because when we think emergencies, we think fire trucks and ambulances and DEFCON 1 or whatever it is. Maybe we just think of it, hey, I need some special care here.
Well, that brings up the pan discussion, right? It's and that's sort of another nebulous term, I think, for a lot of general aviation people. So I don't know, is that, but again, it goes back to what OB says all the time. Use plain language, use human discernible, plain, clear language. You don't have to know the code word for getting help from ATC, but certainly don't be hesitant to declare an emergency. Now, look, we have about 8 or 10 minutes left, which might be enough time for you to talk about this aspect of it, Nate. What did you see in terms of aliens or spaceships or other unidentified flying objects or anything that, or did you see where they're making all the drones did you see all that?
Yep. That's where all the drones come from. They were shooting Independence Day 2 with Will Smith in the same desert.
You saw the edge of the flat Earth. You saw everything.
It was, but it is scary stuff here in 2025.
Now, you mentioned another video and a story in there about the hazard of not declaring that actually led to a fatality. Can you explain that to the listeners real quick?
Yep. And you guys all know I'm a big fan of AOPA's Air Safety Institute and what they do. And I don't know any of us that don't watch those videos and hear that guy's voice and think, wow, this is going to tell us, a real story. And one video from the series, and I'll just summarize it. There was an airplane in the Maryland, Delaware area who you hear them on the radio and there's something up with their engine. The weather's not great and they're flying literally directly over a military airfield. And he asked, hey, can I land at this base? And the controller says, well, no, not unless you declare an emergency. And he ends up not making it and, running out of fuel or having airplane, issues with this airplane to cause it to fail. And you just, sitting here on the ground, you hurt for this person because, it's easy for us to say, please just say the word and go land there. And so I'd always been curious about that. So I asked Major Helton, I said, listen, if somebody flies over your airfield and they're not talking to you or there's smoke or anything, can they land there? And he's like, absolutely, 100%. Come on, land here. If we have payment for you, please land at our airport. And you may get some questions, but we just want you to be alive because the mission of the military, while it's defense, it's public safety, right? And, if there's a takeaway, if from anybody listening to this podcast, if you're, flying a military air base and it's your out, take the out, right? There's nothing, you can't carry pride to the next life. You just need to get that airplane on the ground however you can.
Yeah, that's really cool. I wanted to hit one of the comments from Richard K. He said, I declared an emergency is what he's referring to. I declared a few years back, had to fill out a form and talk to the FSDO. They were cool until they found out my transponder had expired. Oops. Then I got a compliance action, which is, understandable. But his comment followed up by that was, would still declare without hesitation in the future. So, that's great feedback.
Yeah.
Once again, Nathan Ballard flying safely, safer flying with Nathan Ballard. Sorry, I messed that up. Nathan Ballard, safer flying.
I was going to change the name.
Is where you can find him on YouTube. If I say it a bunch of different ways, one of them is bound to be right. That's kind of the shotgun approach I like to take.
Yeah. Hey, Nathan, are you going to be able to make it out to the big Texas Send?
It's on my calendar. I certainly hope so. If I am able to do that, then there's a few other things in the works, but this is definitely a top priority for me.
Okay, I'm putting you on the spot and just trying to get it on record. So, yeah.
Well, he's got some priorities. He's got to get me tailwheel endorsed.
Yeah. I love this, man. I love this. Now, Nate, let's just, you've dealt with pulling 6Gs lately. You have dealt with giving spin endorsements. But none of that is going to be anything close to the peril that you will be brushing up against, flirting with death, having be your tailwheel student. Tell us what would be your first, if somebody like Ben, right? He's been flying for a while, knows what he's doing, can fly an airplane. Do you find that those kind of tailwheel students are maybe more difficult because they've got to unlearn some things? Or give us some insight as to what Ben is going to, I'm trying to think of like, what's the Stanley Kubrick thing? Like, it's like, I want to see the rig. I want to see Ben just getting, like nose to nose screamed at, just the whole thing. That's such a good question. I think to paint a picture, it's going to be kind of like, Dancing with the Stars, and there's, the person that can really dance well with and move their feet. And then you got the star Ben coming in, star of a podcast.
You got the baseball player who has no rhythm whatsoever.
Yeah. Who's got to learn to use his feet. So we're going to start with that, just a simple 2-step first, and we're going to work our way all the way up to, that's the extent of my dancing lingo that I know.
Is it side by side or is it tandem?
It's tandem. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So,
But do you find that it's easier is it better to have somebody that doesn't know as much, or somebody like, is there an unlearned quotient to it from the instructor side of it?
not really. I mean, Brian, you could do your own master class on this. I mean, you just have to adjust not your mindset, but also what are you going to do with your feet, right? And just being aware of what the back of that airplane's doing. Taking off's easy. Flying is easy. There's only one thing about it that's not easy.
Yeah. Well, I guess I just felt like there were a lot of things that were primacy to me about tricycle gear, that your first instinct in tailwheel needs to be the precise opposite. Otherwise you're in trouble quickly.
That's a good point. There are things like, we were talking about heel brakes and toe brakes earlier before the show, and like, well, we're probably not going to use our brakes very much. That's something we'll unlearn. And, aileron inputs and rudder inputs on the ground really matter, right? So that will, that sort of stuff is important from a primacy standpoint. Like, you get it right and get it intensely right at first, and that'll go a long way.
Yeah, like when you land in a tricycle, you're used to kind of giving up the yoke a little bit, and in this situation, you got to pin the tail. It's just there's a bunch of. I just noticed immediately how many things I was instinctually doing that were wrong, and not just wrong, but precisely in direct opposition to right.
Yeah. One of the things I did want to ask about too, when I went up for a ride in the Albatross L39, talking about using your feet and your hands, and it just made my mind explode. It's a caster wheel. So if you want to turn right, you push in the right rudder, and then there's a handbrake like you have on your bicycle that's on the stick. So you push in your right foot and then pull the grip, and then you'll turn to the right. And if you want to stop straight ahead without turning, you have to keep both feet even and then pull the brake. Or if you want to turn left, you have to push your left foot in and then pull the brake. So
that's wild.
It literally there was brain matter all over the canopy. It was just, I couldn't get it. And Larry, the owner of the jet, was like, don't be surprised if the tower calls and says, you need to not let him taxi because he's obviously drunk. I mean, it really, the plane was just, it was no time it was on the yellow line at all. So my mind is set to be open for new things. So I'll just put it to you that way. That's the only reason I bring it up. Awesome. What else do we need to cover? Let's, again, Nathan, let's give everybody the deets on where they can find you.
Well, I appreciate you sharing my channel, and if I know the show, in the show notes, the video will be listed. I appreciate you guys watching. And I'll just say, because I did tell the Air Force I was going to be doing, some things like this. I want to publicly say, and I've done this 1,000 times with them privately, I cannot thank them enough for being as professional and as gracious and as open as they were to somebody like me, so we can help spread the message to all of us on, what are the little things that we can do to be safer out there. I got a couple more videos in this series with some pretty good footage, and really good footage. So look for that coming. And then if you aren't tired of me by now, I'll be hosting NAFI's Mentor Live on Wednesday. I've got a show on augmented and virtual reality and training, which I'm just going to be hosting, and clearly trying to channel my inner Brian, Ben, and Ted to be a good host there. But that's it. That's it from me.
Real quick, I wanted to ask you, sorry to extend this after you just kind of started to wrap this up, but I wanted to ask you, the other thing I noticed when I watched your video is I thought that had to have been a little tricky to mount cameras and get all that sorted out. And I couldn't help but look at it and think of everybody that has recorded and used GoPros and things to record flights, all of us have had countless times where the cameras just die for no good reason, or there's corrupted files, or there's any other number of problems. When I was watching this, I just thought, you're going through medicals. You're learning how to get ejected out of a thing. You got to figure out where these pens go. You're just pulling 6Gs. You're blacking out. You got all this stuff going on. You're trying to honor the military while not being a total jerk and just, whatever. And you're trying not to be in their way, but you got to be in their way to do this thing. And I just was thinking, man, this is a Herculean effort. Were you just scared to death these cameras were just going to die?
I absolutely was. If you want to put the scare level, students first solo, like we talked about earlier, versus cameras dying in a millions of dollars jet when you want this footage so bad, my anxiety was way up there. But once we got in the plane, I mean, what are you going to do? And
so I could hear this phone call. Yeah, I'm going to need to come back out there for another 2 days. Looks like all my footage was corrupted and we're just going to have to do it over again.
Guys, I know you're in the military, but what they call this in the business, pickup shots. So
didn't you lose some footage?
There was some, yes, they provided the heads up display footage, but I only got like the first 4 minutes of it and that file was corrupted. I tried everything to get it undone because just seeing the speeds and the G's on those dives and pullouts, like I would love to have that data, but that was corrupted.
I thought so. This has been a few months, but you sent that file to me and I tried analyzing it and I'm like, man, this is toast. I tried.
It's toast.
I know 7 ways of doing this and none of them worked. So yeah. So awesome. Brian, it did happen. You want everything to go right. And of course something gets burned.
Listen, if that's the worst thing that happened, I think you came out pretty good.
Yeah.
I appreciate you guys letting me tell the story. And I always love being on the other side of this and being the disruptor in the chat room and just having fun. You guys have a great community. I'm really proud and happy to be a part of it.
Well, thank you for that. That's very kind. All right, fellas, anything else for the good of the order?
We just want to remind people to give us 5-star reviews. We always forget to ask for this, but it really does help us out. If you can give us 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts or where, however Spotify does it, or I don't know, go to all the places where we are and press buttons. It really does help us a lot. So just want to put that reminder out there. And don't forget, you can either go to our website or just email us at midlifepilotpodcast@gmail.com and send us some feedback.
Tell us if you've ever declared an emergency and tell us what happened. Give us, we'd like to hear some stories on that. So,
yeah.
Well, gentlemen, run a little bit long, but we'll go ahead and wrap it up. And tonight's bit of wisdom is from my comedy inspiration, Monty Python. Always remember, it's much better to have a bottle in front of you than a frontal lobotomy. A bottle in front of me instead of a frontal lobotomy. Sorry, I screwed that one up. You can edit that in post, right?
Nope.
Oh, yeah.
It's better to have a bottle in front of me than a frontal lobotomy. There you go. Signing off, episode 112 of the Midlife Pilot Podcast. Thanks, everybody in the chat. Y'all have a good week. Take care.